Well, for the month of April, May, and June, we've been talking with candidates that want to represent you in statewide office. Today on State of the Water, we have gubernatorial candidates, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax and former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who are vying to be your next governor. Tune in. This is State of the Water. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's State of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. I want to welcome you back on this weekend for Memorial Day. Again, we're commemorating all of the brave soldiers and our citizens that have given their lives for the protection of this country. And we also hope that you're staying safe out there. I know that a lot of COVID restrictions are going down across the Commonwealth and across the country. People want to get out to the beaches. They want to get out and be with their friends. But we're saying, hey, we're still going to get through this together. Make sure that you're keeping yourself safe. Make sure that you're heeding any type of healthcare restrictions that you need for you and your family. So with that being the case, I want to again thank you so much for joining us for the month of April, May, and June as we have had our conversations with the candidate series. This is it. This is the last slate of conversations that we're having here in the Commonwealth of Virginia for candidates that want to represent you in statewide office. We've talked with candidates who are running for lieutenant governor. We talked with candidates who are vying to be your next attorney general. And we've talked with candidates who want to be your next governor. So today we have the final two candidates that are vying to be your next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And remember, this primary is going to be June 8th on Tuesday. If you haven't voted yet, you can go vote early up till June 5th at your registrar's office. We'll talk more about that. You can also go in and if you want to vote, get your absentee ballot, you can request that, but you can go into your registrar's office and vote early. No reason needed, no excuse needed, go right in. But right now, we have with us a friend of NSU and also a friend of WNSB and State of the Water, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor. So glad to have you here on State of the Water.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claville. Honored to be with you and always in support of the great Norfolk State University, and really appreciate your listeners for having me back on.
Well, it's been, I guess I can say that we've known each other for a little bit over almost a decade now.
Yeah, it's been a while, yes. And a privilege for me, absolutely.
Look, same here. And, it seems like, when we first met, you were campaigning and campaigning at that time for Attorney General.
Right.
And you were the young guy on the campaign trail.
I remember those days, right?
Ambitious and so forth. Look, we were both the young guys on the scene, right?
That's right. You still are.
and now, you've served the Commonwealth as Lieutenant Governor for the last several years. And a lot of great things are accomplished at that time. And we're going to get into some of those things in just a moment. But now you are running to be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Yes,
absolutely. And, and I thank you so much for, the opportunities over the years to really talk with, extraordinary listeners to talk about really our vision for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We've been able to achieve some dramatic progressive success over the last several years that I've been able to serve as Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. I mean, who would have thought, Doctor, that we'd be in a Commonwealth where we have now abolished the death penalty, something I'm very proud that we have achieved. I cast the tie-breaking votes to expand Medicaid in Virginia, and today now 550,000 more Virginians have health insurance as a result of that. We also recently, on my tie-breaking vote in the Senate, legalized personal use of marijuana, becoming the first southern state to have done that. So if you look across the board, all the things that we've been able to accomplish, raising teacher pay, expanding access to the ballot box. And you just talked about us being in early voting right now, June 8th being the primary. Would encourage everyone to come out and vote, but making it easier for people to cast their ballot rather than harder and more restrictive as it's been in so many other states. But we are making tremendous progress to create opportunity for everyone here in Virginia with a really different vision for the future to make sure that everyone can thrive and every family, no matter their race, their background, what part of the Commonwealth they live in, what zip code they're born into, they get a real shot at the American dream. It's what's always animated me in public service, and now we're getting to carry that out in a very real way. And it's a powerful moment in our history to be able to do that.
Hearing you speak about the passion and the purpose in which you are in public service is one thing, but to know your history is another. I've heard this story before, but if you could let our listeners know that story that really compelled you to, and it's to cement your journey in public service.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, Doctor, and I appreciate the opportunity to share this. This was a story that really brought so many things home together for me. I'd always been passionate because of the opportunities that we've gotten in life, my family, my community, even though we were raised in a very tough environment, inner city Washington, D.C. in the mid-1980s, crack cocaine, death capital of the country at the time. With so many people who invested in us, allowed my single mom to send all four of her children to college, two of us to law school. I was the youngest of those four. And so my whole life, I felt like I had an obligation and a duty to give back, to repay what I call a spiritual debt, to make sure that other folks get a shot to rise as well because of that history. But I got the ultimate reminder, Doctor, literally 20 minutes before taking the oath of office as Lieutenant Governor, of just how far this journey has taken all of us in the arc of the moral universe, bending toward justice. And that reminder came in the form of me finding out how I got the last name Fairfax. They had discovered that week in the old Fairfax County Courthouse a deed of manumission, which is a freedom document, that had freed my great-great-great-grandfather,
wow,
Simon Fairfax, from slavery in Fairfax County, Virginia, on June the 5th in the year 1798. And so he was a contemporary of George Washington and others. And so he was freed in 1798. My father got a copy of that document 2 days before our inauguration. But I saw it for the very first time in the bottom of the Capitol 20 minutes before I walked out to take the oath of office as Lieutenant Governor. And so I had a copy of that document in my breast pocket as I raised my right hand and took that oath. And so 220 years later, Simon Fairfax's great-great-great-grandson was being sworn in as the number 2 in command of the very same state where he had been enslaved.
Wow.
And to me, that just really brought home not just the weight of the history, but that really is all of our story. I say we have different versions of that same story, how far we've come, and how if you invest in each generation, you create more opportunity, you expand the scope of who can participate, then really tremendous and powerful things happen in our history. And that's also why within a week and a half of me taking office, as you'll recall, I protested a 150-year-old tradition of honoring Confederate generals in the Senate of Virginia and decided that was not who we are going to be going forward. While others have not taken those sorts of stands, I decided that it was the right thing to do. And I'm proud to say now that we have now broken a 150-year-old tradition. And those Confederate generals are no longer honored in the Senate of Virginia. So that's just one example of how powerful this journey is and how it's transforming really what's possible, and that we can all be included in the story of Virginia and of this nation.
Every time I hear that story, it really drives home for me just the reality of how far we've come, not
right.
just as a country, but also as a people. Right.
Absolutely.
Because you talk about how, you have that document of your lineage who was in slavery and freed. And now you're standing here, in the Senate. You're standing there on the podium, representing the same state in which he was enslaved. I mean, how fitting is, is that to reach that point? Right.
That's exactly right. And, it goes back to, what Dr. King famously said, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it ultimately bends toward justice. And what I've heard others say is that it takes all of us to bend that arc of the moral universe. So the work that we're doing in our lifetimes is about making sure that more folks get that shot, that more people are included within the scope of opportunity in Virginia. So I think that that's essentially what our work in public service, in my view, is all about. So when we invest in education, for example, and I have, from day one, proposed the most transformational investment in education in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia, called our 40-30-10 plan. And what this would do is rebuild and reimagine every K-12 public school in the Commonwealth that's at least 40 years old with a $30 billion investment, and that's billion with a B, over 10 years. So rebuilding all the schools, elementary, middle, high schools, all throughout the Commonwealth in neighborhoods and in communities that have been neglected for far too long. We would also raise teacher pay above the national average for the first time in the history of Virginia, something that I was the first one to propose in this race. And we would guarantee every young person a summer job or enrichment opportunity so that they can pursue their passions in the arts, the STEAM H fields, science, technology, engineering, the arts, math, healthcare, so they can deal with the learning loss from the COVID-19 pandemic and really begin to rebuild out of that, but also so that we create a foundation of opportunity that really reaches every part of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So this is transformational, and the work that we do investing in education, expanding Medicaid, as we did on my tie-breaking vote, dealing with criminal justice reform, focusing on affordable housing, that really all goes to the heart of the journey that we're on together.
Absolutely.
And that's the work that we're doing.
You know, on your website, you talk about justice, fairness, and opportunity. And when you made the proposal about education, it's just not reform, but it's about investment. A lot of times we look at justice as just being just a stroke of a pen to say, hey, we're making amends for this, but it's really equity as well. How will your 40-30-10 plan work as it relates to equity in education?
And that's a critical piece of this. So what we would do, again, is focus on these communities. And by focusing on communities that have not been invested in this case for decades, in some cases for generations, we would be focusing through an equity lens to begin with, because there are so many communities, and I've visited many of them in my 100,000-plus miles traveling around the Commonwealth of Virginia, that have simply been left behind. You have young children going to school and buildings filled with asbestos. And I was in Southwest Virginia recently. I've been in Southside. These exist, frankly, everywhere, in urban communities and in rural communities. And they don't have the technology in place in the schools. The windows are leaking. These are buildings that were built in the 40s and the 50s and 60s. Wow. So starting from a place where we are acknowledging that the history of leaving these people behind, and oftentimes concentrated in black and brown communities, that there was intentional effort made to neglect these communities, and now there's got to be intentional effort to invest in them, to transform them with that history in mind. So we begin with that equity lens, and we talk about giving every young person and guaranteeing them a summer enrichment opportunity throughout their entirety of their academic careers. This is something that I directly benefited from. My very first job growing up was in the D.C. Summer Works program. And you're likely familiar with this, Doctor. This is something that was started by Marion Barry, and it actually has impacted the lives. At this point, it's probably too many to fully count, but I know at least hundreds of thousands, and set them on paths to success in their lives and in their academic and in their professional careers. And so this is something we want to do for every young person in Virginia, again, including in those communities that have been so far left behind. No child's future should be dictated by how much money their family has or doesn't have. Exactly. That has to change, and I think that's the heart of what equity is all about. And that runs through all of our policy proposals when you talk about criminal justice reform and so many other areas that, again, enshrined in those 400 years of discrimination and racial oppression are those living monuments to that oppression that we have to take down as well.
You know what? You said intentional, and that's what we've seen over the course of the last several years. Well, we've seen this monumental wave of change, this progressive change in the Commonwealth and really across the country. Of course, there's fight on both sides, okay, because that's the nature of public policy, right? That's the nature of politics. But we've seen this change of hearts, and I believe it's because of education and people understanding just why things are the way they are and working to correct them. So in being intentional, the pandemic really pulled the covers back on a lot of things that we've been saying, and that, hey, black, brown, poor people in our country are suffering from. And one of that is healthcare. And with healthcare, we saw how the pandemic, how COVID-19 really affected those that don't have.
That's right.
In your platform as governor, how would you address these issues, these historical issues, and what will you do to help to prepare the future so that we don't have to come back to readdress that which we are trying to address now?
That's right. Great question. And what COVID-19 did is it really brought into specific relief all of the many inequalities that have existed in our society for far too long. And your question centers on healthcare, and it's so important because we saw the impact of COVID in particularly black and brown communities. It was devastating, and I actually commissioned a racial disparities task force to look right at the root causes of those disparities, where we're seeing those communities account for upwards of 2/3 to 3/4 of the early COVID-19 infections at the height of the spread of this virus. And so what we need to do in building that intentional system to deal with this going forward is to deal with the foundational issues. One, we know that nearly 700,000 Virginians still don't have health insurance today, even with us expanding Medicaid to 550,000 more. And so we have got to get all those people covered, including about 100,000 children. And it's critical that we get all of our children here covered in the Commonwealth, working with our SCHIP program, which is a state and federal program, but also creating more opportunities as the state exchange comes online here in the next couple of years. We have got to make our lodestar to get every Virginian covered with high-quality, affordable health insurance and with child care, too. This has become a very big issue because what we saw was that many of the folks who are deemed essential workers throughout the entirety of this pandemic are disproportionately black and brown. And so what that meant is that many of them were having to go back onto the front lines of jobs that were exposing them to COVID-19 transmission at much higher rates. And so not only are they at higher risk, but then, of course, their families are as well. And so and that's driven also by economic factors. So we have got to deal with the long-term economic inequality in our society. And part of what we've done is addressing this. We've got to raise wages to a livable wage here. In Virginia, we have raised the minimum wage, which was stagnated at $7.25 an hour since 2009.
Wow.
Had not been raised to now $9.50, ultimately getting up to $15 an hour. We want to do that even more quickly, hopefully within the next couple of years. But we've also got to provide, again, family medical leave, child care benefits so that people can have more flexibility and more freedom. And we don't see what we saw over the course of the last year plus, which is that people were so economically insecure that they had to really put themselves and their families at higher risk without being supported in the ways that we know they should have been. And so, Virginia, I think, navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, much better than so many other states.
Yes.
But we unfortunately still lost, over 10,000 Virginians, and we have, infection rates that were over close to 700,000. So this has been a very serious crisis that we've all had to navigate together. President Biden was just here recently, I think, to talk about how well Virginia had done relative to other states. But again, these are long-term structural issues when you talk about inequality. And we do not need to wait for the next pandemic to address them. We need to start that process right now.
You mentioned a key word, structural, and one of the concepts that's really been gaining a lot of traction throughout society is systematic racism, systematic discrimination, and it really puts a framework around why people experience the same types of suppression or oppression over and over and over again.
Yep.
And it's because it's systematic. One aspect of that is the criminal justice system. And and we see how the criminal justice system have subjected so many of us in communities that are vulnerable to the abuse of these very, very bad policies that are structurally in our system. Under your criminal justice reform, talk a little bit about what you've done as lieutenant governor, and what would you look toward continuing and doing if you become governor?
Absolutely. Well, again, some of the things that we've been able to accomplish, I think, are so important when you talk about structural racism and inequality, abolishing the death penalty, which we know is not only has racist roots, but of course, it's implemented in a very, very racist and race-conscious way. We have become the first Southern state to abolish it. We have banned chokeholds and no-knock warrants in Virginia, legalizing marijuana on my tie-breaking vote. Again, these all have very significant components when you talk about racial equity. But I want to raise something else that I think your great question hits on. We often talk about restoring rights to individuals, and particularly in Black and brown communities. And I think that's something that's obviously very important. And the Commonwealth is beginning to do that much more frequently. But when you talk about structural racism and inequality, the issue that I think we really need to address is why so many are having their rights taken away in the first place, why there are so many Black and brown people in the criminal justice system, why we have dealt with this consistent history of particularly African Americans and African American men who are pushed into a broken criminal justice system, oftentimes have their rights ignored, are not given the presumption of innocence, and find themselves in situations where they are trapped in this broken criminal justice system for a large part of their lives. And so one thing that we've done as well, from a policy perspective, is that I was one of the first people to advocate for what are called conviction integrity units. And these have operated around the country. What they've done is, in conjunction with the Innocence Project, freed and exonerated many, many people around the country, including a disproportionate number of African Americans and African American men, because what we've seen is that the system has failed time and time again.
Yes.
With rushes to judgment and assuming the guilt of African Americans, and then, of course, upon further review, finding out they're actually innocent. But then they've suffered for decades, in some cases have lost their lives. And so that's one policy proposal that we have pushed forward, and I know that others are adopting. I think we should have that everywhere around the Commonwealth of Virginia. And also, we need to get rid of the school-to-prison pipeline, which is where a lot of this begins. And that dismantling of that school-to-prison pipeline has got to take place as early as kids are in our school system. We need to stop criminalizing young kids. We've made some strides with reducing suspension times from 365 days a year down to 45 days a year. And there are other reforms that have been made, but I think it's got to be even more foundational than that. I think we have got to begin to do assessments at the front end of kids getting involved in our school system, and reform the way that we interact with them, and reform the system that deals with oftentimes what are really behavioral issues that would benefit from counselors and other things. But the consistency with which we have seen Black and brown people push through a broken criminal justice system in Virginia and around this country shows that this problem is in fact structural, and that the results that we need to obtain are going to come from an intentional effort to restructure the way those systems operate.
You mentioned foundation, and another aspect of the pandemic is housing insecurity.
Yes.
we found where a lot of our citizens were really looking at homelessness. They were looking at evictions, all because they missed one paycheck, right? Because they couldn't find affordable housing. And that's a very, very scary proposition when you have a family and you're looking at your family saying, I don't know where we're going to go today. In your platform, you talk about housing, you talk about affordable housing. Tell our audience a little bit more of how you would delve into that as governor.
Yes, and this is something that I really zeroed in on even before the COVID-19 pandemic. When I first took office as lieutenant governor, there was a report that was highlighted that said that of the top 10 evicting jurisdictions around the nation, 5 of them are in Virginia, with Richmond being number 2. And so that's pretty staggering when you think about the whole country. And of the top 10, the top 5 or 5 of the top 10 happen to be in Virginia.
Wow.
And so that means we have a huge issue that needs to be addressed around evictions. And so we got to work. We got millions of dollars put in the Housing Trust Fund to create more affordable housing. We reformed the laws around evictions to make it easier for families to stay in their homes and to not suffer the insecurity and the injustice and the indignity of evictions and of losing their housing. But there's even more that we need to do, especially coming out of this pandemic. We know that the eviction moratorium is in place. I think that should be extended through at least the end of next year, working with renters and mortgage holders and homeowners, and making sure that people do not suffer any more than they already have, because it's going to be a long-term recovery in terms of getting them back to a place of security in their housing. But also we know that there are already so many people who have suffered housing loss during the course of this last year. And so we've got to dramatically increase the stock of affordable housing. We need more workforce housing so that teachers and firefighters and civil servants and others can actually live where they work and serve. And that is, that serves a lot of different positive purposes, but that also focuses on the need of housing security, allowing first-time home buyers the opportunity to have assistance from the state and federal government to make sure that they can get into their housing and keep it long-term. This is something that particularly now as housing prices are going up, which we're seeing in many parts of the Commonwealth and the country, that must be addressed right now from a policy perspective. And we need the state to be involved in this, and something I was committed to even before, again, this pandemic, and will continue to do so after.
Absolutely. So last question, and this is our speed round. You're sworn in as governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. What happens in the first 100 days?
We immediately get to work on expanding broadband here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I want us to have universal broadband by the end of my term, so that's making sure everybody is online in Virginia, including all of our students. We, and you may remember this, Doctor, before the COVID-19 pandemic, in our budget had allocated about $300 million for Norfolk State University and Virginia State University.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that we get back to that because we had to put some things on hold during this budgetary process, but I want to make sure that we honor and make sure that that promise, that commitment is kept there. So we're focused on that. And I want to get to work on my 40-30-10 plan, rebuilding our schools and reimagining them all around the Commonwealth of Virginia, because that is going to be critical in the foundation of the success that our communities are going to enjoy going forward. So those are some of the many things, in addition to expanding health care, keeping our unemployment numbers continuing down, trending down. We went from a high of 11.3% in April of 2020. We're back down to about 4.7% and going down further. So we want to get people in their jobs, make sure that they're staying safe coming out of this pandemic. They're in their homes. We're rebuilding our economy and our educational system, getting small businesses back online, focusing on housing security, and continuing the historic work that we've done on all the fronts that we talked about: criminal justice reform, COVID-19 response, and so many other areas that, frankly, make Virginia the leader when it comes to creating progress and opportunity here in Virginia. But we've always got to do it through that lens of justice and fairness and equity and opportunity. And that's really what is at the heart of not just our campaign, but of everything that we've done in public life, and want to continue to do that as well.
If you want to learn more about Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax' campaign platform to be your next governor, simply go to justinfairfax.com. That's justinfairfax.com. There you can sign a petition. There you can volunteer. There you can donate. Justin Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor for the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia for Justice, Fairness, and Opportunity. My friend, thank you so much for joining us here on Stay the Water, and thank you always for your support of Norfolk State University.
Thanks so much, Doctor. God bless you all. Behold,
the green and gold.
Coming out voting June 8th. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Take care. Thank you.
Well, you've heard the first half hour of Stay the Water as we conclude our conversations with the candidates. Scandalous, we're talking with the last two candidates for vying to be the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. That was Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. He talked about his platform of justice, of opportunity, and also fairness. Again, if you want to learn more about his campaign platform, please go to justinfairfax.com. Coming up in the second half hour, we will have former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who is coming back running to be your next governor of the Commonwealth, where he wants to continue the work that he did in his last campaign and last gubernatorial term and continue it for the Commonwealth of the people. Thank you so much. Tune in. We'll be right back in just a moment after this commercial break.
Programming on Blazing Hot 91 is supported in part by
Brothers Chops Seafood and Spirits, presenting the Brothers Jazz Series, featuring trumpeter Rick Braun. Rick Braun performing as part of the Brothers Jazz Series. Upstairs in the Law, June 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. 2 shows nightly, 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Sunday, 3:30 and 6 p.m. Brothers Chops Seafood and Spirits, 200 East Plume Street in Norfolk. For reservations, brothersnorfolk.com.
Support for WNSB provided by Rugged Evolution Beard Care, featured in Essence Magazine. Rugged Evolution Beard Care, offering 16 scented balms and oils, shampoos, accessories, including leave-in beard conditioner for all men hair types and facial styles. Rugged Evolution's complete product line and information is available at www.ruggedevo.com. Rugged Evolution Beard Care, www.ruggedevo.com. Rugged is the new smooth. Rugged Evolution wishes you a happy Father's Day. Norfolk State University proudly congratulates the graduating classes of 2020 and 2021. You did it. You persevered. You kept the faith and you crossed the finish line. Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, you overcame insurmountable odds. Please know that Spartans everywhere are immensely proud of your achievements. Behold the green and gold.
Thank you again for joining us here on Save the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we are concluding our conversations with the candidates. For the months of April, May, and June, we've talked with candidates who want to represent you in statewide office for Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, and now Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Remember, you can go out and early vote right now up until June 5th. Go to your local registrar's office and make sure that you cast your vote in this June primary. And keep in mind that if you miss the early voting period of June 5th, you can also go and vote on the day of the primary, which is June 8th. Whoever wins this primary is going to be the candidate that represents the Democratic Party in the general election in November. So I hope you've enjoyed our conversations so far. In the first half hour, we've had Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. And now, in the second half hour, we have former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who wants to come and be your next governor for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Governor McAuliffe, thank you so much for joining us on State of the Water.
Doctor, great to be with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, you are no stranger to the Commonwealth of Virginia. You served as our governor from 2014 to 2018, and you did some phenomenal things that have never been done as governor in that first term. And now you want to come back and continue the work of the first term and even more.
Yep, you bet.
Tell us.
Think of the first term. People forget 8 years ago when I went into office, our economy was wrecked, as you remember, after sequestration, the Great Recession. We had the most anti-women, anti-gay, anti-environment, pro-gun legislation in the United States of America, and people were leaving the state. So we got to work. I made our state open and welcoming, vetoed 120 of their crazy right-wing bills, rebuilt the economy, created 200,000 new jobs, recruited 1,100 businesses to come to Virginia, $20 billion of new capital, and personal income went up 14%. And I really, as you know, Eric, leaned in on the criminal justice issues that were, I've always said this. I mean, we've had a racist criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
I had the most restoration of rights of any governor in the history of America. And what happened? The Republicans sued me again for contempt of court, but I won. And today, 250,000 felons who did not have the right to vote ever for the rest of their lives can now vote in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's what I love to do. Lift everybody up. We got COVID. We got to go big and bold. No more tinkering around the edges.
Absolutely. You mentioned sequestration. That seems like ages ago, but during that time, monies were cut off to every state. But during your term as governor of the Commonwealth, somehow we got through it and we were better even after sequestration.
Yeah, and people got to realize Virginia is the number one recipient of Department of Defense dollars.
Absolutely.
So Congress passed sequestration, automatic defense cuts. And the problem, Eric, we had was that we were so reliant on defense money, we never thought it would go away. And when it got dramatically cut, there was no underbelly of a new economy. That's why I built what I call the new Virginia economy. We became the number one state for cybersecurity, number one state for data analytics, number one state for unmanned systems. I rebuilt our entire education system, K through 12, put $1 billion in, got rid of a bunch of SOLs, and started teaching STEM-H courses beginning in kindergarten, the first state to do it.
Absolutely. There are 3 areas in your platform. There are so many areas that you've tackled as governor in your first term. And it looks like you're going to put the foot to the pedal and continue in the second term as you're elected our governor. I want to talk about the jobs for Virginia and the economy. We saw where COVID-19 basically decimated a lot of industries, and we're having trouble getting those industries back. But for Virginia, for the Commonwealth, we're in a great position to really move forward in a lot of other areas such as clean energy and the like. Tell us your plan to move Virginia forward and rebuild the economy.
And you're right. COVID has cost Virginians 180,000 jobs.
Oh, wow.
Since it started. Yeah, 180,000 jobs lost since that started. And it's particularly been difficult in the black and brown communities.
Absolutely.
41% of the small businesses in America, black and brown businesses, have shuttered. And many of them not coming back. So my whole, just like I had to do last time, rebuild, I think we've got a couple of huge opportunities here in Virginia. Life sciences, bio, and clean energy. If you look at my plan, I call for 100% clean energy by 2035. What we also need to do is be designing the new technologies here in Norfolk State and other places, but we also need to begin manufacturing them.
Yes.
When I was governor before, remember I had a right-wing wacky legislature. They didn't believe in clean energy and all that. And, I used my governor's authority to put us back in the regional greenhouse gas initiative. I joined the U.S. Climate Alliance when Trump took us out of the Paris. I took solar production up 8,000%.
Wow.
Jobs increased 65. So that, I agree with you, Eric. That is our future that we need to lean in on. But we also, Eric, need, we got to bring the minimum wage up to $15 by 2024. We need paid sick pay, paid hazard pay. Virginia likes to do things on the cheap. And you know what? We can't do that anymore. COVID has really shown a light on the inequities in our education system, in our economy. And that's why I'm fired up. Listen, leadership of the Black Caucus came to me and said, Terry, we need you back. And, that's why I'm back doing this again. But with a Democratic legislature, Eric, we should lead the country on clean energy.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't follow. We should lead. I signed the first offshore utility wind project in American history, which is being constructed right now. That happened when I was governor. As you know, Eric, I saved the aquifer in Hampton Roads. You've seen sea level rise go up 14 inches since 1950.
Wow.
That will wipe out $30 billion of real estate value in Virginia, in Hampton Roads, if we don't get serious about it. That's why, I did the Ohio Water Creek project. I got $120 million from the federal government to build those berms to save those African-American communities. We can do this.
Absolutely.
It's got to take work. And, the Republican nominee is a Trump loyalist. He's a right-wing private equity billionaire. He doesn't believe in any of this stuff.
When you talk about lifting everyone up, and you mentioned those communities that are extremely vulnerable. And one area that we know that is the key to help open up every opportunity or most opportunities in our country and in the world is education. You talk about investing $2 billion annually in our public education system. Tell us a little bit about how you would delve into and go about doing that.
So here's the key. I was the biggest job creator, as you know, 200,000 new jobs, led the country on cyber and data and all that. The reason I was successful, Eric, was that I had put $1 billion in education to redesign our whole K-12 so that employers around the globe, I convinced them that we're serious about workforce development. I wrote the bid for Amazon and submitted it before I left office. It was the largest economic deal done in, 40, 50 years. We won that here in Virginia. I got ADP to move to Norfolk, 1,800 new jobs down there. Why? because we had a great education system. So I always view education not as a cost, but as an investment. And the big issue here, let's take teacher pay, K-12 teacher pay. You take an average teacher's salary of a Virginian teacher today and compare it to the average salary of your workers. Do you know, Eric, where we rank on average teacher pay?
Where is that, Governor?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where is that? Where do we rank?
50.
What?
50. 50. We are last in the country. And yet, Eric, we're the 10th wealthiest state in America. You could go to Delaware, you could go to Maryland, you could go to Pennsylvania and get $10,000 to $20,000 more a teacher. And you wonder why we're down 1,000 teachers. So what I'm going to do, $2 billion a year, pay our teachers above the national average for the first time ever. I'm going to get the 40,000 at-risk 3- and 4-year-olds pre-K. I'm going to make sure every student in Virginia is online within 2 years of becoming governor. And I'm going to diversify the teacher base. If you'll go, and your listeners should enjoy this, if you'll go teach in Virginia in a high-demand area for 5 years, I will pay room, board, and tuition at any HBCU, any college, any university in Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is what I call keeping our talent here in the Commonwealth.
That's it. You bet.
You know,
you're in the Hampton Roads, Eric. You've got great education. You've got water. You've got the military. You've got everything. That Hampton Roads region should be like lighting it up with their economy. That everybody wants to go live there because you've got all of those assets there.
Absolutely. You know, when I talk about Hampton Roads, I talk about it with such fondness because of all the things you just mentioned. We have the water. We have the diverse communities. We've got the military and the families and the support of our military here. And we have a great educational base. So the constant investment in this area is not just a win for the people, but it's also a win for the Commonwealth of Virginia, which I want to now talk about the affordable housing plan that you have. One thing that we found that COVID did, it exposed how vulnerable a lot of people are, a lot of our citizens are with affordable housing. They were one paycheck away from being homeless. If it wasn't for this legislature and our current governor really passing a moratorium and stopping evictions, you know, but we can't really, we can't hold moratoriums and hold back things and stop people from being homeless. Talk about your plan for affordable housing throughout the Commonwealth, not just in the urban areas, but also in our rural states.
Well, first of all, let's define a huge problem we have. We have 260,000 Virginians right now that are under the threat of eviction. Eric, if you take the top 10 cities in America for evictions, Virginia has 5 of the 10 of all 50 states. So we've got to build an equity, affordable housing. We need more affordable housing. You're right. Rents have gone up 21%.
Oh, wow.
People's pay hasn't gone up. So the one thing we need to do is we need to get more federal waivers from the federal government to allow us to do vouchers so that people, you know, we have more affordable housing. We've got to stop the evictions. We've got to do rent relief. But we've got to invest millions of dollars in the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. Very important we do it. I do think, Eric, raising the $15 minimum wage next year is really important.
Yes.
But we got to stop discriminatory lending. And we've got to break down the barriers of the zoning and regulations where we make it so difficult and so expensive for a developer who actually wants to build affordable housing, but we make it too hard. So I put a commission together to look at those regs. I'll put more money in the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. We will. And listen, I did this before. I reduced homelessness by 15% last time I was governor. We took family homelessness down by 27% in the first state in America to functionally end veteran homelessness, the Commonwealth of Virginia, when I was governor. So, but you're right. It's we need a lot more affordable housing. It's not fair that people got to drive an hour and a half each way to get to work. And, you know, it's an issue there, and it's really an issue up here where I live in Northern Virginia.
Absolutely.
I mean, people got to drive way past Gainesville. And so we just get everybody affordable housing, get all 700,000 folks health care, give them a great job. We do that, Eric, we're making great progress. But COVID has highlighted the problems. And if we tinker around and do small ball, now Virginia is not going to lead the nation. We're going to be stuck where we are for the next 30 years.
Absolutely. Governor, you talked about COVID and healthcare. And one thing is that we found, what you did in your first administration, expanding Medicaid and really fighting for it. And of course, I remember that legislative body that you were dealing with, that you had to use executive powers to do it. Talk a little bit about your plan to continue to fight for affordable health care for the citizens of the Commonwealth.
So we've got 700,000 Virginians without health coverage today. Think about that. 300,000 African Americans in that and 100,000 children in that. So what we need to do, my goal would be to get every person in Virginia affordable quality care. The first thing, Eric, we would have to do, I would call my good friend Joe Biden, who is the president, and ask him to give Virginia what's called a Section 1332 waiver.
Okay.
We don't have one here in Virginia. If we get that waiver, it will allow us to stand up our own reassurance program. Number two, I would set up our own state exchange. Number three, as governor, I would make Virginia the toughest state on these pharmaceutical companies. I mean, costs have gone up dramatically on folks, on prescription drugs. I mean, you think of insulin was like $5 25 years ago. It's the same drug. It's now $350.
Oh, my God.
Explain that to me. So we've allowed these pharmaceutical companies to rip folks off. So I'll get a sunlight law. I'll give more state authority, be a watchdog on these pharmaceutical companies. I know I need to put more money in mental health. I know we're dealing with an opiate crisis. Last year, Eric, was the biggest death year we've had in the history of Virginia with opiates. 2,000 people died with an opiate overdose last year in Virginia.
Wow.
So more treatment facilities. That's what we need to do.
And Governor, you mentioned in your last administration how, you tackle criminal justice reform by going back and giving individuals who have served their time, paid their debt to society, the ability to do something that every citizen in our country has the right to do, and many have fought for and died for, and that's the right to vote. And
That's right.
And we see how COVID again exposed a lot of the systematic discrimination and systematic laws put in our public policy to really suppress and really take away the opportunity for a lot of Black Virginians to advance. Tell us more about how you would continue to address those systematic discriminatory policies in criminal justice and just across the board.
So first of all, your listeners should understand. So when I became governor, I was horrified to find out that we had this 1902 racist Jim Crow law that was put in our Constitution, and it was put in to disenfranchise Black voters. It basically said if you're convicted of a felon, you will never vote for the rest of your life. Now, think of that. So you've got some young guy, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Someone goes out and steals a bunch of clothes, $200, and the felony threshold recently was $200.
Right.
You steal $201, you never vote for the rest of your life. It just was, to me, was just, and 40 states it's automatic, but, it's a lot of the southern states, as you know. This is Jim Crow law. And I found it so abhorrent. So I went out and got a lawyer and said, can I get rid of this? And I stood on the steps of our Capitol and with the swipe of my pen erased 114 years and gave 206,000 people the right to vote back. And you know what happened, Eric? Republicans sued me, took me to the Supreme Court, and then sued me again for contempt of court. You know what? What about me? And ultimately we won, and 250,000 people today can vote. But I also, Eric, had the most pardons than any governor before me, 227. Think of this, Eric. There was a young man by the name of Lenny Singleton, young African-American man. He went to a party one night. He tried cocaine, and he got addicted. It just grabbed a hold of his life. And over the next 5 or 6 nights, he'd go out and do a little grab and go. He would, steal from a 7-Eleven. Nobody injured, no weapon or anything. His total theft, Eric, was $511.
Wow.
Guess how long his sentence was for $511?
How long?
Take a guess.
20 years.
Close. 2 life sentences plus 110 years.
Oh, my gosh. That wasn't even close.
Lenny Singleton. Travion Blount, 15 years old. Bad mistake. Tried to rob a drug dealer. Had a gun. Didn't use it, but had a gun. 15 years old. 6 life sentences plus 118 years. I pardoned both of those.
Wow.
And they're good friends of mine to this day. but, I give you 225 more. My point is we've got to end this horrible over-criminalized and over-sentenced racist system. So as governor the next time, I will continue what I did before, but we're going to get in our Constitution automatic restoration rights. None of this governor signing stuff, automatic. I testified in Majority Leader Sharon L. Herring's bill this year, and it will pass next January, and then it will go to the voters in 2022, and then we will take care of that.
Governor,
I also want to get more investigators to look at people who should no longer be in prison. They've been there forever.
Yes.
They're no longer a threat, and you know what? I'm spending $35,000 per prisoner. It's morally wrong, but it also doesn't make sense for the state.
You know what? Now, that's a plan. That's a plan.
Yeah.
Governor, it's been so wonderful talking with you, and our time is just about gone. Again, if you want to learn more about former Governor Terry McAuliffe's plan for the next term, should he become governor for our Commonwealth the second time, go to terrymccullough.com. That's terrymccullough.com. And also, Governor, I want to tell you, I want to thank also my former student and mentee, Ryan Jackson, who's your political director.
Yeah, I want to know what grade you gave Ryan.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ryan did good enough to get an internship with Congressman Scott's office, and then he's working with you.
Right.
So.
Yeah, he's a good man. In fact, I was with him all morning. We were doing Petersburg churches today together.
Yeah, Ryan's a great guy, phenomenal worker, and just another phenomenal product.
He's still honeymooning. But I told him it's time to get some more Democrats coming.
There you go. There you go. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, buddy.
And
Appreciate it, sir.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Everyone, that was former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who is vying to be your next governor for a second term. He talked about how he served the Commonwealth in 2014 and 2018, how he served and I remember that legislature that he was dealing with at that time. Very similar to the legislature that former President Barack Obama was dealing with when he was also in office. During that time period, both of those chief executives, former President Obama, Terry McAuliffe, former governor, really started using the power of executive order in order to help the people that were calling for change. But a lot of that legislation was being blocked. So, again, phenomenal conversations with the two final candidates for vying to be governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia from 2021 to 2025. That was Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax and former Governor Terry McAuliffe. Again, if you want to learn more about their campaign, you want to volunteer, you want to donate, you can want to send an email, send a comment, whatever the case may be, go to justinfairfax.com and terrymccullough.com. That's justinfairfax.com and terrymccullough.com. And keep in mind that you can go back to our shows. Our shows are uploaded immediately after we finish the live show. They're immediately uploaded to our YouTube page, and you can access that through wnsbonline.org. That's wnsbonline.org. Go back and listen to the conversations. Listen to this conversation with former Governor Terry McAuliffe. Listen to the conversation that we had with current Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. Go back and listen to the conversations that we had with the current Attorney General, Mark Herring, and also his challenger, Delegate Jay Jones, vying to be the next Attorney General of the Commonwealth. And also go back and listen to the conversation with current Senator Jennifer McClellan, who's also vying to be governor of the Commonwealth. And you can listen to all of the candidates who are vying to be lieutenant governor. You can listen to Sam Rasool. You can listen to Xavier Warren. You can listen to Delegate Allah. You can listen to all of those conversations. Just go to our YouTube page, wnsbonline.org. That's wnsbonline.org. And keep in mind, again, you can go and vote now. This is the primary, but this primary is extremely important because this primary will determine which Democratic candidate will run in the general election for November to represent the Democratic Party in the election to be the next governor, the next attorney general, and the next lieutenant governor. These primaries are extremely important. We don't want to forget about it. I know we talk about there's an important election every year here in the Commonwealth, and that's true. There's an important election every year in the Commonwealth because who you put in office makes sense. Isn't that right, Scandalous? I mean, think about it. If someone else was elected in the office, let's just say delegate or senator, where a lot of these houses in the General Assembly, we have very narrow margins. A lot of the legislation, a lot of things that were done in the past legislative session would not have happened. And just think if we would have elected someone else as governor who had the ability to veto a lot of these laws, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. So elections do have consequences. So again, make election time a time of enjoyment, make election time a time to engage together and go out to the polls and vote. Now, again, right now, up until June 5th, early voting has started. Up until June 5th, you can go to your registrar's office downtown and you can vote there in person. If the mail-in ballot worked for you, you can order a mail-in ballot as well and then receive it and then fill it out and then drop it in the mailbox and mail it in. Look, all of the false reports about, mail-in ballots don't work and so forth, they were just that. They were false. We're opening up access to the ballot box. We see a lot of states that are restricting your access to the ballot box, but we're opening it up. We're giving more opportunities to meet, and we're meeting the people where they are. We're meeting the need. And that's what our public servants should do for our government. This is our government. You have a say-so in it. This is our democracy. As we celebrate Memorial Day, we can't forget about all the men and women and families that sacrificed their lives so that we can have this democracy. To everyone who served in our military force and as public servants, because we can't forget that a lot of service is not just military, but it's also public service. If you're a civil service worker, if you're a civil service employee within the military or within government, this is also a celebration of your sacrifice as well. But of course, we commemorate those that gave the ultimate sacrifice, and that's the sacrifice that they gave of their lives fighting for our democracy, fighting for our freedoms. So it's up to us, because they died and fought for it, it's up to us to preserve it. And how do we preserve that? We preserve that by getting engaged, staying engaged, understanding what our responsibility is, understanding that our responsibility is great, understanding that our responsibility is one that we will definitely pass down and to our children, our posterity, and understanding that honoring those that fought and died for this. As African Americans, we know that the right to vote is something that we were fought against having from the very beginning. We know that it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act that gave us protection under the law, that gave us the opportunity to vote. Because even though we had the opportunity under the Constitution, there was a lot of opposition that was there. A lot. Poll taxes, grandfather clause, guess how many beans in the jelly beans in a jelly jar, literacy tests, how many bubbles in a bar of soap. All these tactics that made no sense, but only wanted to stop you from exercising your right to vote. But again, our hour has ended, and every time we have a great conversation, it looks like time just flies. But guess what? You can relive it. Just go to our YouTube page at wnsbonline.org and go back and listen to this conversation. Also, you could join us every Sunday at 1 o'clock here on WNSB Blazing Hot 91. You can stream us online, or you could turn your dial to 91.1 FM and listen to us. And let us know how we're doing. Give us your comments. Please let us know. Is there some issues that you want us to talk about? Because this show is for you, the people, where we bring policymakers, movers and shakers to talk about issues that are important to the community. Again, we want to thank you for joining us. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next Sunday.